One thing that we touched on in previous discussion is travel, and how much we both enjoy the fool out of it. How many countries have you been to?
I started putting the list together, and let me quickly see if I can, just to jog my memory. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, various Caribbean islands, Scandinavia, the United Kingdom, Ireland, France, India, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. And the last two, we wouldn't have gone had we not had a friend there who was going to be our host and guide, but he is an Indian friend of ours, which is also how we made the India trip. He resides in Dubai now, or works in Dubai, and invited us and his family there. And so we got to visit there and went on a trip to the Qatarian desert for a dune adventure. And that's where a picture of me, as I call the Hammack of Arabia headgear with the dunes behind. So
I don't think I've been to Qatar or the Gulf states, but I did spend 15 months in Baghdad. Wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I wasn't there on vacation. Maybe it was a mandatory paid vacation with, threats of violence.
So that would be on your list to probably not go back, right?
Don't go back, man. Even if you do visit it, everything's covered in sand. It rains mud, okay? It rains mud. It's not pleasant. Go to the American Southwest. It's pretty. It's far more civilized. Your chances of getting blown up are way, way down. Showing up on a YouTube video involuntarily, not likely to happen. But
we did see a dust storm in Dubai, so we understand what it means to rain mud. I mean, if you have that much dust in the air, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, so it really makes a lot of sense why they want to cover their women up so much, because they don't want their women to get sand blasted and sand in their hair all the time. And the ladies, I doubt they want that either, because it's not comfortable. So right. Yeah, there's a cultural component, but there's also a practical component. And I never thought I would be defending the veiling of women, but here we are.
Well, I would say, the wrapping, both of the men and the women, had a practical component to protect against that. So, yes.
True story. When did you go there?
I want to say 9 years ago, maybe, about.
Okay.
So, yes, got to ride a camel briefly and got to do some dune buggy drifting out there with experienced drivers. One of the really neat things that we saw was they have endurance horse races in the desert. It's not like the Viggo Mortensen movie. It's not, you don't go out into the wilds. It's on an oval track out in the desert. And I say track in the old sense of the word, not meaning it's a little path, as opposed to, it's not a road, it's not a path at all, it's not turf. It's sand, but it's a track, it's flattened. That was really cool. And the way that, if you are special guests or tourists, can get to watch is they will take you out in Jeeps, dune buggies. You get to ride alongside the horses as they're racing. And frequently there are people there with water bottles, and they'll toss a bottle or hand a bottle to the riders. They're going. The riders don't drink the water. They're putting it on their horses. They're trying to keep them cool for the rest of the trip. Now they run a certain amount of time, then they have to come in, and they're taking a break. And when they come in, it's kind of like a NASCAR pit stop, kind of, except the rider is taken off, and about 20 technicians, vets, and caretakers surround the horse to check them out. As far as I know, maybe the rider got a drink of water, but it was the horse that was important again. So.
The horse was probably more valuable than the rider was.
Very much so.
Good deal. So horse racing in the desert, that sounds interesting. And so that was about 9 years ago. Where was the first place you went?
The first place that I ever traveled out of the country?
Yeah.
As a child, my parents took us to Canada along the St. Lawrence Seaway. Mostly, I remember seeing a lot of water, a lot of islands that look the same, and the view out of the back side of the station wagon, so.
Oh, y'all did it that way. And you're from Alabama. That's a drive.
It was a long time, yeah.
And now this India trip, I've heard it before. I want more people to hear this. This was really interesting. What got you to go to India?
We had a friend, our church had a program called International Friendship Partners. And this was not to provide residency or a room for a student like a student exchange, but rather to provide a few opportunities for international students to see America. I lived in Birmingham, and the University of Alabama in Birmingham is home to a large international contingent of students for medicine and engineering and nursing and many other areas now. But back then, that was primarily what was attracting them. And when they told us that a surprisingly large number of international students never travel beyond the confines of the university that they're at in the host country, it really is a shame. And so this idea was to try to find a compatible match friend and for us to give them a chance to be included in some family events and an idea of American fun. And so that would mean taking to movies. We took him and a couple of other Indians to the first baseball game. And of course, I had to try to compare that to my limited knowledge of cricket. And that was a lot of fun. But pumpkin carving, we had some great Shiva pumpkins carved by them that year. So yeah, you get an interesting mix of traditions here. It was a very, very worthwhile experience for us as well as for him. And years later, he came back and invited us to his wedding in India. In America, if you ask someone verbally to go to a wedding, but don't send them anything written, it's considered informal and they might not really want you to show up. It's kind of the reverse there. If they want you to show up, they have to ask you in person. And he actually came to Seattle on a business trip, a computer trip, and detoured back to Birmingham to ask us to come in person to India.
That is a big detour. That is not a small distance.
It's
even
not
on
a small
plane.
distance. It's not a, and we appreciated that and went, we never thought of that, but how can we say no was basically the thought at the time. And the interesting thing is that I had just been accepted for what would become a 27-year career at Jefferson County at the environmental laboratory. And I had to ask them to postpone my start date by a month so that I could get back from this Indian trip. But man, it was worthwhile. It was hot. This was the southern part of India, Kerala, southwest coast. And later we went to the southern tip, the Kanyakumari, where the Indian Ocean and the Pacific and the Bay of Bengal meet down at the tip there. It's considered a sacred space. And separately, Susan and I went to our other Indian friends from Birmingham. Once they found out we were going to Faisal's wedding, said, you must come to visit our family in Bangalore. And so we took a railroad across the Ghats, the mountains, to Bangalore and stayed there for a couple of days. And then because we were in India, we took a trip back up to Delhi and took a trip to Agra to see the Taj Mahal, because even though we were a subcontinent away from the Taj Mahal portion of India, you can't be that close and not go. You really want to go. So.
Because if you're going to make a repeat trip, that's so much more time and effort than just doing it while you're there, just getting it done.
Right. And we're glad that we did. It was great. It was enlightening, as when you're taking the bus trip from Delhi to Agra, we encountered elephants doing road construction work, shifting logs, and they're still using elephants for that. And we did see cows in main thoroughfares on streets in Delhi blocking traffic. All of those things happen. And yeah, the Taj Mahal was really wonderful. It's really beautiful. What those of us from a historical gaming background may not know is that right across the river from the Taj Mahal that you don't see in the pictures is the Red Fort, which is a fantastically well-preserved fort of that era. Huge. It's not like the many of the crumbling castles, Norman castles and things. It's really cool. So
So how
yeah,
did the wedding go?
it was a
Was it
great
nice?
side trip. Oh, yeah. Now, yeah, Indian weddings are like a 3-day affair, So, yeah, it was great. The bride has to wear all the gold of the family as a display and feasting, and for a poor American with a questionable constitution, I had a lot of Zantac with me to help with the spicy food. So
Your Southern
it
upbringing
was
didn't protect you?
marvelous. It was great. It was marvelous.
That's
We saw the tourist things of the region, the snake boats, which are long river boats of the area. They have backwaters, kind of like the Louisiana bayous for these things. Kathkali dancing, which is a type of operatic dance which can go on for way longer than we mercifully were treated to. I mean, they can go on for a day, so you just don't want to do Ayurvedic healing and clinics. We saw medical clinics up there, saw a Hindu ceremony, although our friends were actually Indian Muslims. The village they were in is predominantly Hindu, and they had a Hindu cleric come in and give a ceremony so that we could see it. So that was nice.
that is cool. That is
Yeah.
cool. Now, I remember you having told me about an interesting thing you had to drink while you were there.
On the snake boat trip, we were treated to what our friend referred to as the local moonshine. This was a fermented coconut product that was like a day old. It was the worst alcoholic product I've ever had in my life. And and I've been through college. I've had Mad Dog 2020
Thunderbird.
and blender punch of whatever leftovers are thrown in. So yeah, it was very bad. Again, there are things where you go once and you're glad, and that particular drinking experience is one I shan't repeat.
So, do you have a favorite country that maybe we haven't talked about?
I'm going to say New Zealand. The picture of me in Hobbiton there in New Zealand, and Scotland and Ireland were great fun too. I had fun when I went to Norway a long time ago. But New Zealand, gosh, it's so beautiful. There's something pretty to see everywhere you look, and there's as much adventure to be had as you're willing to go for. So it was great.
I found that when I visited Scotland and me and my wife, we rented a car and went hiking around the Highlands, that we had a similar experience to what you're talking about with New Zealand. It's like every step you take, what you see deserves its own painting. Take
Right.
another step, this could be its own painting. It was just mind-bogglingly beautiful. And even though it rained on us pretty much the whole time, I'm like 51% Scottish, according to whatever ancestry is saying these days. And there was something like in me was like, yes, I'm designed to be like wet all the time. It doesn't make you happy, but I'm like, okay, this feels comfortable. And so,
Right.
like being in the deep South, walking through this soup of air that we have, I like that. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'm getting moisturized properly here.
I think that among the Scottish scenery, especially in the Highlands, is pretty breathtaking. But I think you have to be there in person before you get the idea of, I think I see why it took the British so long to actually conquer there, because it's incredibly difficult terrain to march through, and you literally can't see what's over the other hill if you're in this valley. And it was very pretty. And we enjoyed our time in Ireland as well. I might say, that I sampled one of the local red beers everywhere that I went in Ireland, except for Dublin, where I had Guinness. So, at the Maker itself, it was a great trip. Those were my favorite places.
Now, just a little plug about Scandinavia then, because imagine that's real pretty.
I went a long time ago, one summer in college. The funding for my summer expected job didn't come through. And so they said, we don't have a job for you. And I went, I'm going on a trip. I may never get this what chance again. So I went to Scandinavia and saw Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Went as far east in Finland as the Russian border, got pictures of the signs in Russian saying, do not take pictures of these signs, And we went all the way up to Nordkap, North Cape Tip, the northernmost point of Europe. So I took the path down and I took off my shoe and I stuck my toe in the Arctic Ocean so I could say that I had been there. So, yeah. And let me tell you, it was summer and still a blizzard. So, it wasn't, your easy peasy conditions. So,
oh, so you were dealing with the northern, those days without night, weren't
correct.
you?
Midnight sun. Yeah.
Midnight sun. Thank you.
Yeah. Which was very cool in and of itself, seeing the sun dip down at midnight and then go back up again.
But it was weird for my sleep schedule because me and the wife went to St. Petersburg, Russia during the Trump era. There was like the 6-month window when it was cool to visit. And we were there during the summer, had that. And it was so weird. It'd be 10 o'clock at night, bright outside. I'm not tired because my brain says it's daytime. We should still keep going. Couldn't sleep for nothing. And so the Russians made a lot more sense to me then. You spend the entire summer not able to sleep. So you got to drink yourself to sleep. And then you don't see the sun for the entire winter and you have to drink to cope. And I feel for you, Russia. I feel for you, but it's a great place. Is there a place you didn't like that you went to?
There are national governments that I don't like. I wouldn't say there's anywhere where I didn't like the people. The list of places that I might not go back to because I think I probably wouldn't return to France again. I probably wouldn't go back to Mexico again. I just think Mexico's too dangerous to go back to. Those are probably the two that I'd scratch off. I think I'd return to almost any of the others.
So Mexico for the danger issue. Got it. Why France?
I saw Paris, I saw Versailles, and there actually is something to the rudeness and condescension stereotype, or at least there was when I visited.
That's what I thought. That's what everybody says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why not go back to countries where all I experienced was friendliness and thank God you're here, tourists. We appreciate you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like the friendliest people I've ever met, more friendly than the Scottish and the Irish, who are legendary for being friendly, were the Moroccans. Mm-hmm. Like even the street hustlers trying to con you out of money, incredibly polite, incredibly nice. I got invited to some dude's family dinner that I just said hi to at this mosque I visited, and I didn't take him up on it. I totally should have, though, because it would have no doubt would have been a great experience. But that's interesting. Thank you. Me personally, I would say Spain, because I find them to be incredibly rude, even to each other. And when I visited Madrid twice, the whole place stank of BO, diesel, cigarette smoke, and you can't get away from it. It's like a miasma that follows you. But Portugal next door, love it. Would retire there. Absolutely would. It's all the good parts and none of the bad parts.